There are names so sacred they were whispered only once, in the dark, then hidden for generations. In Africa, names weren't just spoken, they were carved into spirit. What if the true name of God wasn't lost, only veiled in silence? Long before scripture, doctrine, or colonized language, African civilizations knew something the world is only beginning to remember: that to name something is to give it life, direction, and purpose. A name was not assigned, it was revealed. It carried essence. It commanded energy. It sealed fate. In African cosmologies, names were not casual identifiers but sacred instruments, forged through ancestral knowledge, divination, and divine utterance. From the red earth of the Sahel to the temples of the Nile, from the forests of Nigeria to the highlands of Ethiopia, names served as the architecture of reality. Naming was the first act of creation, the breath before the world began. To speak was to summon. To name was to bind spirit to form. And above all names stood the veiled, the divine names, the secret names, the ones too holy to be uttered outside the breath of ritual. In many African traditions, only priests, oracles, or initiates knew the sacred names of the gods. Some were sung during specific ceremonies, some written in sacred scripts only when the stars aligned, and others were never spoken aloud at all, only imagined through symbol, rhythm, and vibration. These names weren't hidden out of fear, they were hidden out of reverence. They were encoded in myth, embedded in masks, scattered across proverbs and praise songs like puzzle pieces waiting for the initiated to find. But what do we mean by the names of God? Were they singular? Were they fixed? Number. African spirituality understood the divine not as a monolith, but as a living spectrum, ever-shifting, multi-dimensional, expressed through layers of identity. One supreme source, many manifestations. One pulse, infinite rhythms. And each divine aspect had its name, not just as a label, but as a doorway into the metaphysical realm it governed. These divine names were not only sacred, but dangerous in the hands of the uninitiated. Because to know a name was to access its power. In ancient Kemet, the myth of Isis and Ra reminds us that even gods could be rendered vulnerable through the theft of a secret name. In Yoruba cosmology, the unknowable Olodumare expresses through Orunmila, Obatala, Olorun, each a divine function with a vibrational signature. In Igbo cosmology, names like Chukwu Abiyama, Chi Ukwu, and Chineke are not synonyms. They are spiritual frequencies of a source too vast for one name to hold. This is why names were whispered. This is why they were hidden. This is why even today, many African naming ceremonies involve ancestral consultations, spiritual rites, and moments of profound stillness. To listen, not just to speak. Because naming, in the African context, is not a human invention. It is a sacred inheritance. And this video is about that inheritance. About the hidden power within names. About the divine language encoded in the syllables we speak and the vibrations we carry. We'll explore the origins of naming in African cosmology, the sacred names of the divine, how humans mirror the divine act through the names we give each other, and why some names were forbidden altogether. Because when you remember the name of a thing, you restore its soul. When you speak a true name, the universe listens. And when you reclaim the sacred names of your ancestors, you reclaim a part of your divine self. Let's begin. In the beginning, there was no sky, no earth, no time. only vibration. Soundless yet full, motionless yet alive. Then came the word. In nearly every African cosmology, creation begins not with light, but with sound. Not with matter, but with intention spoken. Naming was not an afterthought. It was the moment reality crystallized from the formless. To name was to create, and that name was the universe's first breath. In Kemet, the ancient land known today as Egypt, the god Ra did not mold the world with hands. He spoke it into being. His utterance gave birth to the sun, the earth, the waters, and the gods themselves. And yet, Ra too had a secret. His true name was hidden. Known only to him, it was the core of his power. Until Isis, through cunning and divine strategy, extracted that name. With it, she gained access to the raw essence of creation itself. The myth reveals a profound truth, that to know the true name of a being, especially a god, is to wield authority over its nature. Across the continent, this principle echoes. Among the Yoruba people, the supreme source is Olodumare, the origin of all things. Yet Olodumare did not shape the cosmos with tools, but with breath. Through the utterance of sacred sound, Olodumare released Ashe, the life force, the divine command that animates the universe. Ashe is not just energy, it is power in motion, and its release comes through speaking, chanting, invoking. Here again, we see that naming is more than description. It is divine technology. The Igbo speak of Chukwu, the source, who manifests the universe through Okike, a term that means both creation and divine law. But Okike isn't just an act. It is an expression, a spiritual principle embedded in language itself. Chukwu names the aspects of existence into reality, and those names hold the moral and metaphysical framework by which the universe operates. To speak these names, properly, reverently, is to align with the cosmic order itself. The Akan people of Ghana hold that the word is the seed of the cosmos. Their concept of creation involves the Kra, the soul, and the Abasum, spiritual forces that govern the natural and unseen worlds. Just as the divine names seeded creation, so too do humans receive soul names that align them with divine intention. In Akan worldview, to name is to direct, to give shape and trajectory. And names, once spoken, are not merely sounds. They become part of the architecture of the world. The Dogon of Mali carry a similar cosmological depth. For them, Amma is the supreme creator, and creation unfolds through vibration. Words are not just spoken. They ripple through time and space. In Dogon cosmology, to name a thing is to embed it with meaning and placement. Each word is like a frequency that finds its rightful place in the harmony of the cosmos. Silence precedes sound, and from that sacred silence comes the utterance that forms the world. And these words, these original names, were not always preserved through speech alone. Across African civilizations, sacred scripts emerged to carry the weight of vibration into form. The Nsabidi symbols of the Ajagam and Igbo, the Medu Neter hieroglyphs of Kemet, the Adinkra of the Akan, and the Vi script of Liberia, all served as vessels for divine utterance. These weren't alphabets in the modern sense. They were spiritual diagrams, each symbol a resonance of a name, each inscription a frozen chant. Imagine sound becoming shape, vibration forming geometry. Picture a priest in an ancient temple chanting the name of a god, and that sound crystallizing into symbols that glow and shimmer. This is how the ancestors understood language, not just to communicate, but to manifest. Writing was not invention, it was revelation. A visual echo of spiritual truth. In this context, naming becomes a sacred responsibility. It's not simply about what sounds pleasing or what honors family lineage. It is about cosmic alignment. To name a child, a deity, or a place is to invoke its essence, to call forth its destiny. This is why in many African cultures, naming is preceded by ritual, silence, divination. You do not assign a name, you receive it. The name already exists, hovering in the spiritual realm, waiting to be drawn down like lightning into form. So, the cosmic origin of naming in African thought is not metaphor, it is metaphysics. The word was not just with God, the word was God. And Africa, long before translations and revisions, already knew that. Here, in these stories, we do not find superstition. We find structure. We find a metaphysical blueprint where language, sound, and identity converge. The act of naming is not a cultural curiosity. It is the divine spark, the original invocation that gave us earth, sky, spirit, and self. This is the power that lies beneath the names. This is the breath behind the word. This is why, when we speak of names in African tradition, we are not speaking of history. We are speaking of creation itself. Across the vast spiritual landscapes of Africa, one truth echoes again and again. The divine is too immense, too multifaceted, too sacred to be confined to a single name. God is not a figure to be captured in a word, but a presence revealed in fragments, in vibrations, in divine frequencies that shift depending on the context of worship, ritual, and sacred time. In this understanding, to name God is not to define, but to invoke. And every culture encoded that invocation in ways only the spiritually initiated could fully comprehend. The ancient Egyptians understood this mystery deeply. In Kemet, the name of a god was never simply decorative. It was a repository of their Heka, their spiritual force. And no story demonstrates the hidden power of divine names more profoundly than that of Ra and Isis. Ra, the sun god and original creator, held within himself a secret name. A name so sacred that no other being, divine or mortal, was permitted to know it. This name was not for casual utterance. It was the essence of Ra's being, the code of his power, the vibration that kept the universe aligned. But Isis, goddess of wisdom and magic, sought that name. Through an act of divine trickery, she gathered Ra's saliva, created a serpent, and poisoned him. In his agony, he could not heal without revealing his true name. And so, he whispered it to her. At that moment, Isis gained access to the deepest secrets of the cosmos. Not through violence, but through cunning, will, and knowledge. The myth tells us that to know the hidden name of the divine is to merge with its essence. Not just to pray to it, but to wield its force. This idea echoes powerfully in Yoruba cosmology. Olodumare, the supreme being, is unknowable, vast, formless, and beyond comprehension. No one speaks directly to Olodumare. Instead, the divine manifests through a sacred pantheon of Orisha, each one embodying a specific vibration of the divine whole. Orunmila, the spirit of wisdom. Obatala, the force of purity and creation. Olorun, the ruler of the heavens. These are not gods in the Western sense, but facets, spiritual technologies through which humans can interface with the Supreme. Each Orisha's name carries within it a fragment of the name that cannot be uttered. Each ritual chant, each drumming pattern, each offering is a coded invocation. It is through relationship and rhythm that the divine speaks back. To know these names is to align oneself with the specific divine currents they represent. But to misuse, mispronounce, or casually reference them is to risk distorting those sacred frequencies, which is why access has always been protected by initiation. In Igbo cosmology, this multi-layered view of the divine persists. The supreme source is Chukwu, the Great Spirit. Yet Chukwu is rarely invoked in isolation. There is Chukwu Abiyama, the god of Abraham, Chi Ukwu, the Great Personal Spirit, Chineke, the Creator God, Obasi Dinelu, the King who dwells above. These names are not mere titles. They are different tonal expressions of a singular spiritual force, experienced through different lenses depending on the need, the ritual, the lineage, and the context. Each of these divine names operates like a spiritual tuning fork. When spoken, they do not simply refer to God. They open up energetic channels. The names themselves are prayers. They carry the encoded rhythm of centuries of invocation, ritual, and ancestral memory. They are vibrations honed by generations who understood that naming was not about categorization, but communion. Among the Dogon people of Mali, the supreme creator is known as Amma. This is not a name in the Western sense. It is a sound, a resonance, a sacred utterance that binds matter to spirit. The Dogon believe that before form emerged, before stars and humans existed, Amma created the world through sound. This sound was not arbitrary. It was cosmic structure, a metaphysical formula chanted into existence. Amma is not described with anthropomorphic traits. Instead, Amma is experienced through the encoded knowledge passed down by Dogon priests, often guarded through symbols, mathematics, and astronomy that align perfectly with ancient truths. The Kongo people speak of Nzambi and Mpungu, the Almighty God whose power is within all names and all things. Nzambi is not distant. Nzambi is immanent, present in nature, in ritual, in the spirit of the community. The name itself breaks down into layers of meaning. Nzambi, the spirit, and Mpungu, of infinite power. In rituals, this name is invoked with deep reverence, often alongside other aspects of Kongo cosmology, like Simbi spirits and ancestral guides. The name is more than a call. It is a recognition that divinity flows through every aspect of existence. When you place these traditions side by side, a pattern emerges. The name of God is never singular. It is never fixed. It is a spectrum, a sacred continuum of sound, symbol, and energy. African spirituality did not try to define God through doctrine, but through invocation and experience. The divine was not something to be debated in texts, but something to be accessed through correct utterance, precise ritual, and moral alignment. The hidden names of God were protected because they were powerful, because they could heal, summon, bind, and transform. And because, in the wrong mouth, they could distort energy, open portals that were meant to stay shut, or attract forces that were not ready to be welcomed. This is why initiation mattered. This is why priests and spiritual leaders carried lineages of sacred knowledge, why language and pronunciation were treated as spiritual sciences, not casual acts. Imagine now, as the chants rise in sacred rhythm, as deities of wood, bronze, and bone merge into radiant light, each name echoing not as word, but as vibration. The drumming matches the heart. The chant becomes breath, and breath becomes bridge. This is not mythology. This is memory, encoded in every syllable, every name still whispered under the stars, still sung in ceremonies across the continent and throughout the diaspora. The divine name in Africa was never a secret to hoard. It was a mystery to respect, a power to prepare for, and a truth to live by. Because to speak the hidden name of God was not just to call, it was to become. If the divine named the world into being, then every human name carries an echo of that primordial act. In African tradition, naming is never arbitrary. It is a sacred technology, a bridge between the spiritual and material worlds. To name a person is to define their place in the cosmos, to affirm their essence, and to set their feet on a path that has already been prepared for them. Names are not merely references. They are instructions, invocations, and contracts. And in the African worldview, to call someone is to command their spirit. The Yoruba people understand this deeply. Their philosophy of Oruko Amutorunwa teaches that each soul chooses their name before birth. These are not names selected out of affection or fashion. They are spiritual titles, revealed through destiny. A child does not merely arrive in the world. They descend from the realm of Orun carrying a blueprint. And that blueprint includes the name they are meant to bear. Sometimes, these names are received through divination or prophetic dreams. Other times, they are revealed during the sacred naming ceremony, a ritual moment when the community pauses to ask the ancestors, "Who has come?" This reverence for naming reflects a profound spiritual logic. The idea that identity precedes arrival. A child's name may reflect their pre-birth agreements, their spiritual mission, or even the circumstances of their arrival. A child born during hardship might bear a name that reflects the endurance of the family. A child born after many losses may carry a name of joy or divine reassurance. In each case, the name is not a descriptor. It is a pronouncement of power. The Igbo people echo this belief in the saying, "Aha madu bu indu madu." A person's name is their life. Among the Igbo, naming is both sacred and social. A name ties you to your ancestors, your community, and your cosmic essence. Many Igbo names begin with Chi or Chukwu, referencing God or the personal spirit assigned at birth. These names do not merely celebrate the divine, they invoke it. Names like Chinedu, God leads, Chukwuma, God knows, or Chibundu, God is life, are daily affirmations, shaping the person's destiny every time they are spoken aloud. Names are also used to express a family's prayers, history, or lessons learned through experience. In this way, the act of naming is communal. It is a ritual of memory and vision, an act that binds the present to the past while projecting into the future. And in times of crisis or transformation, individuals may take on new names, often through initiation, achievement, or spiritual awakening. A name change is never cosmetic. It is a metaphysical reorientation. The Akan people of Ghana have developed this concept into a sophisticated naming system that reflects both personal essence and collective belonging. Each Akan individual receives at least two names, the Kradin and the Abujuadin. The Kradin is the soul name, often chosen based on the day of the week a child is born, but layered with cosmological and spiritual meaning. This name aligns the person with the elemental and ancestral forces associated with that day. For example, a boy born on Friday might be named Kofi, a name associated with balance, communication, and artistry. The Abujuadin, on the other hand, is the clan or family name, a signal of lineage, ancestral heritage, and spiritual duties inherited through blood. Together, these names create a spiritual equation, one that defines both the individual and their place within the cosmic order. A person is not simply a self in isolation. They are a spirit walking a road prepared by many who came before. In Ethiopia, names often serve as theological declarations. It is common for names to reflect attributes of God, affirmations of faith, or declarations of divine strength. Consider the name Haile Selassie, meaning power of the Trinity. This is not just a regal title, It is a spiritual claim. It suggests not just authority, but sacred responsibility. Many Ethiopian names follow this pattern, connecting the individual directly to divine characteristics. Mesfin, prince. Kidus, saint. Berhanu, light of him. Here, the name becomes a lifelong meditation, a call to embody that divine quality in thought, speech, and action. But across all these cultures, it is not only children who are named with reverence. Kings, priests, warriors, and initiates often receive names through ritual transformation. These are not additions to their old selves. They are declarations of new selves. A king's throne name signifies his divine role. A priest's sacred name links them to their deity. An initiate's new name marks the death of the old identity and the rebirth of the soul. To rename is to rebirth. Naming ceremonies themselves are spiritual events of high importance. They often involve libations to the ancestors, consultation with oracles, drumming, dance, and prayer. Elders gather to call down blessings, to speak words of protection and prophecy. The atmosphere is not just celebratory, it is charged with spiritual presence. At the climax of the ceremony, the elder leans in, cradles the child, and whispers the name into their ear. That whisper is not a formality. It is the ignition of destiny. In that moment, the spirit is sealed into the body. The soul is recognized by the community. The future begins to breathe. And it is not just about the child. In African societies, the act of naming is a way of renewing the world. Each name carries vibration, frequency, intention. A community that names well lives in harmony with the spiritual realm. A society that forgets the sacredness of naming risks losing its alignment with the divine order. This sacred art of naming is one of Africa's most powerful inheritances, one that has survived colonization, migration, and time itself. Even in the diaspora, you hear the echoes. Names like Malik, Ayo, Zola, Ashanti, Kwame, Nia, names that carry old meanings in new mouths. They are more than identity markers. They are acts of reclamation. And each time they are spoken, they call forth power from the unseen. To name a person, then, is to speak into their bones, to shape their spirit, to place a divine fingerprint upon their existence. In African tradition, to name is to know. To know is to call. And to call is to command. Not all names are meant to be spoken. In the spiritual worlds of Africa, where words are not mere sounds but vessels of force, there are names so potent they must be concealed, hidden from the uninitiated, veiled from casual tongues, and uttered only in the sacred spaces where energy is correctly aligned. These are the forbidden names, sacred utterances that hold the raw codes of spiritual entities, ancestral powers, and divine presence. They are not unknown because they were lost. They are unknown because they were protected. In many African priestly traditions, the true names of deities and ancestral spirits are never spoken in public. They are preserved and passed down through spiritual lineages, guarded by the initiated, the priests, diviners, healers, and ritual specialists who understand their weight. These names are not only keys to summoning spiritual beings, but also blueprints for their energy. To speak them without the proper intention, without the right preparation, or without the spiritual authorization is to risk unleashing what one cannot control. This is why many traditions across Africa and the diaspora employ the concept of double names. A public name may be known to the community, a name that represents the visible aspect of a person, spirit, or deity. But there is also a secret name, one revealed only during rites of passage, initiations, or sacred encounters. This hidden name holds the true essence, the metaphysical identity behind the form. For human beings, it is often the name given by ancestors or diviners. For deities, it is the name that contains their primordial vibration, the name that calls them from the unseen into the seen. The power of this secret name lies not in its secrecy alone, but in the context in which it is used. It is often accompanied by ritual language, chants, invocations, and offerings that align the energies between worlds. In some traditions, a priest or spiritual practitioner will only use the hidden name during moments of direct communion, in trance, in possession, or in the heart of ceremony. To know and use the hidden name is a sacred privilege, earned through spiritual training, moral discipline, and alignment with ancestral law. The relationship between names and masks in African religious expression offers another window into this sacred concealment. In many cultures, a deity is not approached directly, but through a mask, a sacred object that embodies the divine force. Each mask has its name, its chants, its rhythm. But these names are often ritual names, not the true names. The mask is both a symbol and a veil. It allows the deity to appear in a form that humans can engage with, while preserving the deeper mystery of the essence behind it. The name used in the dance, in the chant, in the community gathering, is a name of approach, not a name of command. This layered approach is not only about spiritual protocol, it is a profound form of spiritual protection. The Igbo dibia, or spiritual priest, understands that invoking a deity requires exact knowledge of that deity's energetic signature. Mispronounce a sacred name, and you may attract the wrong force, or disrupt the flow of the ritual. The Yoruba Babalawo, trained in the sacred Ifa tradition, learns thousands of verses and chants, many of which contain coded references to the Orisha. These names are not simply recited. They are intoned with mathematical and rhythmic precision, aligning breath, intention, and cosmology. One of the most important aspects of this tradition is that these names are not always words. Some are sounds, some are clicks, some are chants without direct translation, sonic frequencies that resonate with specific spiritual realms. And in some cases, the names are taught not through language, but through experience, revealed during dreams, through trance, or as a whisper from spirit during deep divination. The name, in this case, is alive, not a linguistic unit, but a living being. These practices were not confined to the African continent. In the diaspora, they survived, transformed, and continued to evolve. In Vodun, Candomblé, and Santeria, initiates often receive sacred names when they are reborn into the spiritual house. These names are not chosen by parents or priests alone. They are divined, revealed by the spirits themselves. Often, the name corresponds to the Orisha or Lawa who governs the initiate's head, a spiritual alignment that shapes the rest of their life. The name is whispered during initiation and may never be spoken outside of ritual space. To reveal it to the uninitiated would be to expose the core of one's spiritual identity, a profound act of vulnerability, and in some cases, spiritual danger. The secret name is not about exclusion. It is about sacred timing. It is about allowing spiritual knowledge to unfold in layers, according to the readiness of the soul. Just as a seed is not forced to bloom before its time, the divine name is not forced into ears that are not prepared to carry it. To know the hidden name is not a trophy. It is a responsibility. And in many traditions, the one who carries that name is bound to live by it, to honor it, to protect it. This sacred law that names hold power and power must be earned, has echoes in spiritual systems far beyond Africa. The ancient Egyptian priesthood operated under strict rules regarding the use of divine names. To speak the name of a god was to invoke their presence, and so names were uttered only during the correct lunar phases, in consecrated spaces, with precise tone and rhythm. The Hebrew Kabbalists also preserve secret names of God, combinations of letters and sounds believed to contain the blueprint of creation. These names, like YHVH, were not read aloud, but substituted with titles like Adonai or Hashem, acknowledging the sacredness of the unspeakable. Ethiopian mystics and Christian monastics similarly guarded divine names, embedding them in chants, prayers, and scrolls meant only for the initiated. In all these systems, we see the same core belief, that the name is more than identity. It is essence. It is energy. It is a doorway. And every doorway requires the right key, turned at the right time by the right hands. So when we hear of names that cannot be spoken, names that are hidden in chants or guarded by priesthoods, we are not hearing superstition. We are witnessing a spiritual protocol, one designed not to hoard power, but to protect it. Because some truths are not safe until the soul is ready to receive them. And some names are not silent because they were forgotten. They are silent because they are waiting. There was a time when language was not simply spoken. It was lived. When names were not written to be archived, but inscribed into the air, the body, and the spirit. Africa was once a continent where every sound had weight, every name had direction, and every utterance carried sacred geometry. But the violence of colonization did not only seize land, resources, and bodies, it attempted to sever Africa from its own divine voice. It waged war on memory through language, replacing sacred scripts with foreign alphabets, and sacred names with names of conquerors. Before the forced erasures, before the missionary schools and censored tongues, there existed entire systems of writing and symbolism uniquely suited to express the spiritual depths of African cosmologies. In Kemet, the Medu Neter, the divine speech, was not merely hieroglyphic art. It was a coded language used by initiates and priests to describe the laws of nature and spirit. Each glyph was multidimensional, symbolic, phonetic, numerical, and metaphysical. These were not letters, they were keys. Keys to unlock cosmic knowledge, to chart the soul's journey, to invoke the divine. Elsewhere, the Nsabidi script flourished in southeastern Nigeria among the Ejikam and Ibibio peoples. Used to record laws, rituals, relationships, and esoteric knowledge, Nsabidi was visual poetry, a language of power that lived in the hands of the initiated. Like Medu Neter, it wasn't designed for public use. It was a sacred tool. And though many of its meanings were silenced under colonial law and Christian suppression, fragments remain, in secret societies, in masquerades, in the carved marks of ancestral shrines. The Bamum script of Cameroon and the Adinkra symbols of the Akan people in Ghana further testify to the sophistication of Africa's visual languages. These systems combined art, wisdom, and spirit, each symbol a philosophical reflection, a communal ethic, a spiritual code. Adinkra symbols like Iban, protection, Duafe, cleanliness and feminine virtue, or Iban Ne Odo, safety and love, were more than decorations. They were prayers. They were names of virtues, reminders of the divine nature encoded in human life. But colonialism declared these languages backward. It replaced them with alphabets that could not carry the same spiritual weight. Children were beaten for speaking in their mother tongues. Rituals were demonized. Naming traditions were mocked or diluted. And so the language of the gods began to recede, not because it lost power, but because it was pushed underground. Still alive, but hidden. Still waiting, but unheard. And yet, even beneath the rubble of historical erasure, the names endured. Because names carry memory. They carry vibration. Every time someone says Ayo, meaning joy in Yoruba, or Kofi, born on Friday in Akan, or Chinedu, God leads in Igbo, they are speaking codes of spiritual truth. They are calling forth ancestral rhythms, whether they realize it or not. Even names like Zola, Nia, or Imani, popularized throughout the diaspora, pulse with the soul of African cosmology. These names are more than sounds. They are resistance. They are restoration. They are quiet revolutions against the silence imposed by empire. And every time a parent chooses a traditional name for their child, they are not just preserving culture. They are reviving a frequency. They are stitching back a thread in the divine web that once covered the continent, naming the world into beauty, harmony, and alignment. Reviving traditional names is not just a matter of cultural pride. It is metaphysical repair. It is a return to the original logic of naming, that to name something is to recognize its divine purpose. When we reclaim African names, we are reclaiming spiritual structure. We are restoring lost connections between word and world, between identity and ancestry, between human sound and divine pattern. This work is already happening. Across the African continent and diaspora, there is a movement, conscious or unconscious, to remember. African Americans are renaming themselves after decades of being called by names of plantation owners. Caribbean children are receiving Yoruba or Swahili names that echo their lost heritage. In Ghana, young people are reviving day naming systems. In Nigeria, parents are returning to compound names with deep spiritual meanings, like Ife-Dayo, love has become joy, or Temi-Dayo, mine has turned to joy. These are not trends. They are spiritual restorations. In schools, in ceremonies, in music, in poetry, African names are rising again. And as they rise, so does the language of the gods. Not in its entirety, not yet, but in fragments that glow with eternal memory. Every syllable a spark, every name a doorway. And one day, as we continue to speak these names, to chant them, to write them, to teach them, the fullness of that divine language may return. Not to replace the languages we use now, but to anchor them in deeper truth. Because the name of God in African thought was never just a word. It was a resonance, a pulse, a rhythm flowing through all living things. The divine was not something to define, but something to feel, to embody, to sound. In the whisper of a name, in the hush of ritual, in the breath between the drumbeats, there lies the echo of the original speech, the first utterance that split silence into time, that broke stillness into stars. To remember the names of our gods is to remember ourselves, not just historically, but spiritually. Because in remembering, we begin to hear again. We begin to speak again. And in that speaking, we begin to heal. The secret name of God has never been lost. It has always been Africa itself. We began with a whisper, a name spoken only once, then hidden in the folds of time. From there, we followed the sacred sound through creation myths, spiritual codes, ancestral wisdom, and living language. We traced the path of the divine word, from the gods who named the world into being, to the children whose names carry the breath of heaven. We listen to the silence that protects forbidden names, and the ceremonies that awaken those once lost. And in the end, we arrived not at something new, but at something ancient, something waiting to be remembered. This journey was not just about names. It was about return, to purpose, to resonance, to spiritual structure. We moved through creation stories where words shaped the cosmos, into traditions where names were forged in heaven, and toward futures where every uttered name is an act of revival. Because every Ayo, Chinedu, Kofi, Nia, and Haile carries in its vibration a piece of the divine blueprint. Each name holds a frequency encoded with memory, mission, and meaning. Now imagine Africa not in silence, but glowing. The continent alive with words, symbols, chants, and breath. Adinkra symbols hovering over villages, Nsabiti scripts drawn into sand, Medu Neter pulsing on temple walls. From mountain to river to ocean shore, names echo in 1,000 tongues, vibrating through time, summoning ancestors, and awakening generations yet unborn. Each name a light, each sound a spark. The map of Africa lit not by borders, but by language. Sacred, ancient, and alive. Every name is a world, every sound a creation, and the first word ever spoken was sacred. If this journey stirred something ancient in you, let it live beyond the screen. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to remember. Drop a comment below and tell us the name that carries your power. And subscribe to Africosmos for more sacred storytelling, ancestral knowledge, and hidden truths from the heart of Africa. Your voice matters. Your name matters. Let's speak our way back into wholeness together.